Robert Plank Show, episode 164. Get off the treadmill, redefine success, question your priorities, and become a better role model with Joe Martin. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Robert Plank Show. This is the podcast where we talk about working from home, building your own destiny, and whatever else that entails. Our guest today is Dr. Joe Martin, and he is an award-winning international speaker, author, educator, and certified man builder. I can't wait to figure out what that is. He's the author of 9 books, including Are You the Man? 201 Lessons I Wish My Dad Would Have Taught Me, and The Real Man Spiritual Leader Blueprint. So Dr. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me.
I am glad that you are here. So, I mean, why men? Like, why the focus on men? Don't men have kind of like a lot of the power? Why do men need help? And why did you specifically focus everything that you do, or the ways you help people? Why is that focused towards men?
Well, Robert, it didn't start out that way. It really my passion, and when I started out, I've been in education for over 23 years. Started out as a professor, college professor. I've taught at the high school level, taught at the elementary school level. I've worked at all levels in education except for middle school. I tell people because I'm not crazy, but but I've taught at all levels. And as I worked in the education system, obviously we deal with kids all the time, and we deal with students who are going through a lot of issues, a lot of anger problems, classroom management, that type of thing. So typically they bring me in because they want me to help fix some of the problems with the schools. And we're talking about, I've been to probably over 750 school districts across this country. But as I reflected on my own life, I realized that there were some issues that I went through as a young man, even though I grew up in a very, very bad environment. Just let's put it this way. When they make a video game after the neighborhood you grew up in, there's something wrong with your neighborhood.
Oh no.
You heard the game Grand Theft Auto, right?
Yes.
Yeah, one of the neighborhoods they did a game on Liberty City was my neighborhood.
Oh
And
jeez.
so I grew up in a very dysfunctional home, but in spite of having a teenage mother, dad left when I was only 2. You're talking about addiction, abuse, all rampant in my home. By the time I reached the age of 16, I had buried 6 of my friends. I had I gotten past all of that and became the youngest professor ever hired to teach in the state of Florida at the age of 24. And so I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school, let alone go to college. So, and I had my doctorate degree before I was 30 years old. So I became this quote, American success story of how you can grow up in abject poverty and still overcome a lot of your past. The problem was, though, was Robert, that I had succeeded as a male, but I had failed as a man. And when I say that, by the time I reached the age of 30, I was making a very good income, had owned several businesses and that type of thing. But my family was falling apart. I wasn't the kind of father I needed to be. And it all comes back full circle of me being an educator when I got to the root of the problem that there was a father wound that was caused there that was never resolved. So a lot of my success was basically me overcompensating for a lot of the pain that I had endured as a child. So when I start seeing this dynamic, not only in my life, but start seeing it in children's lives, I felt that there was a need that issue needs to be addressed. But I wasn't really convinced until I met a man when I was in my 30s who pretty much took me under his wing and mentored me, not as a successful businessman, because I earned more money than he did. He's never written a book before, but he had 8 kids and he'd been married for 30 something years. And I got to live with him for 5 days in his home. And that changed everything for me. And that's when I realized that I was a very successful male, but I wasn't a very successful man. And what I realized is that there were some things and skills I was never taught as a young man growing up in the projects in Miami that I needed. And when I found that those skills were necessary, I realized, I said, wait a minute, there's probably a lot of guys who don't know this. And as I went out into the country, still doing what I do with education, one time I went to this one school and I asked a group of kids, and had to be about 90 of them in the room. I said, how many of you had a successful male in your home who you respect and admire and you want to be like one day? And Robert, no one raised their hand,
Oh
not one.
no.
And so my question, and this is what I would pose to even your listeners, and you to ask, and I'm going to ask you the question why you think I went into this. If these people, these kids want to be successful at something, but they don't have somebody to teach them how to do it, how do you expect them to ever learn it? And so what I'm realizing, there's a lot of quote men who are older now who never were taught how to be successful husbands, successful fathers, successful leaders in their home. Because what difference does it make if you succeed outside on your job, but you're failing in your home. So in a nutshell, that's why I got into, because I saw that there was a huge need for it, and that there's a lot of grown men who don't know how to be successful men.
That makes a lot of sense, and I mean, a lot of things were clicking there with me, Dr. Joe, especially with the whole situation of if the home life and family life growing up was not ideal. I mean, let's face it, with a lot of people, with probably the majority, there's always some kind of stress, always some kind of problem in childhood that kind of bled over into later in life. But a couple of things kind of struck out at me as you were explaining that. I mean, one is that the the meaning is what you make of it, right? Like you were
Right.
talking about, growing up in the projects and you had all these things stacked up against you, and instead of like keeping that going, instead of just kind of giving up right then and there, you channeled it, and maybe not quite in the right way at that point, but you channeled it into something else, right? And then the
Right.
other thing that kind of made me think about was that, I mean, men don't really like to talk, right? I mean, just like women love to talk about their feelings and stuff like that, or at least that's the stereotype, right? Women love to talk
Hmm.
about how their feelings and kind of explore things, and I think that the stereotype with a lot of men is, I'm just going to be a tough guy. I'm just going to react to this thing, and so do you think that that leads to like the destructive behaviors? I mean, what do you think that ends up with if that problem is left unchecked?
Well, I think you alluded to it that if we don't express it, I call it, if you don't express it, you're going to suppress it, and you're going to oppress other people. So in other words, if you internalize this stuff, it's gonna cause you to hurt on the inside. You're just human. So because I deal with a lot of children, so what I see is, even when I see adult men, I still see them as little boys. That's not trying to disparage them or try to put them down. Is that I see the woundedness, I see the hurting, and you're right. A lot of men, they try to cover it up, and we try to overcompensate. It's now, with me, it was through success, but you can easily say through women, through money, making a lot of money. It could be through getting a lot of degrees, a lot of, in other words, there's a lot of things out there we try to overcompensate with. And it usually leads to self-destructive behavior. And you've heard that saying, Robert, that they say a person who is hurting, that they hurt other people. But I even go along to say this: not only do they hurt other people, they hurt themselves, and they're easily hurt. That's why you see a lot of our stuff comes out in our anger, is because we're really hurting. And that's what I see with the little boys in the schools, is that they are so angry because they're disconnected from their fathers. They won't admit it. I mean, even in seeing kids in elementary school, they won't admit to you how bad they're hurting. And so I see this just perpetuate itself in adulthood, and it usually spills out into our marriages. When you're looking at the divorce rate the way it is right now, and I always try to say, we always like to beat up the man and say, well, he's not doing his job, he should be a better husband. But my question is a deeper question: who taught him how to be a successful husband? What was his blueprint? What was his model for what a successful husband looks like? And if you go back and look at it, most men were never taught how to do it. And so it's not about getting them really to express their feelings, so to speak, because you're right, because men don't like talking about that stuff. But I just want to get them to a point that they'll admit that, you know what, I don't know how to do this. You don't have to tell me how much it's hurting you. Do you know how to do it? And if you say you do, who taught you? And if you don't know how to do it, what do you do when you don't have the answer to something? You seek the answer. So yes, I do understand the stereotypes, and that's typical. That's the way we're made up. I was the same way. But I realized also that I was lacking a lot of things. And I didn't know what I was lacking until I saw it. And that's when I realized it.
I mean, it sounds like really scary stuff, like admitting if you don't know something, or admitting if if you've reached the end of your knowledge or your skills, and you have to find that role model, or you have to find that outside help to have someone look at you from the outside in to figure out where you need to change.
I look at it this way, that it's because I tell people there's nothing wrong with not knowing. I'm an educator, for goodness sake. I realize that you can't know everything. What I'm more concerned with is not what you don't know, it's what you don't know. It's I call it unconscious incompetence. That's when you can become dangerous, when you don't even know what you don't know. Because most men that I run into, if you ask them, okay, now, how do you fill your wife's emotional bank account? Gary Chapman's book, The Five Love Languages. Do you know your wife's love language? How do you win the heart of your son or your daughter? How do you take your daughter out on a date before some boy does so you can show her how a man should treat her? How do you communicate respect to your wife without having, how to get intimate with your wife without having sex with her? These are a lot of questions that a lot of men have, but they don't even know they need to know the answers to those questions.
I mean, amazing, and it reminds me of like the Donald Rumsfeld stuff, right? Like there's known unknowns, so it's like, okay, I know the questions, I don't know the answers, but if there's unknown unknowns, I don't even know the questions,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't know
even
the
know where to
questions to
start.
ask. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, as far as, people, and, men in particular, fixing these problems in their lives, right? Like having a better marriage or a better relationship with their kids or, with like business success, avoiding that trap of being successful on the outside, but hollow on the inside. I mean, would you say that these things like the anger or the overcompensating, I mean, would you say that for some people or that works for a while or that can be somehow used as fuel? Because I mean, just the question I'm trying to figure out is that, okay, well, if someone like corrects some of these things that are wrong, is it possible that someone might lose their edge, or how do they fix the problem without losing that edge? How do they have that drive without kind of, I don't know, like becoming a pussy, I guess, to use some vulgar language?
And Robert, I think that's a great question because I mean, I used to think about it myself. I was so driven, man. When I used to scare my college students, I used to always tell them, I said, "You guys need to be thankful that I'm not in school with you guys." I said, "I would eat your lunch." I mean, I was a person who would just driven. So think about it. To become a professor at the age of 24, I bought my first house before I graduated from college. Now, there are people who are a lot, quote, more successful than I was, made a lot more money. But if you saw the background where I came from to achieve those type of things in education is unheard of. And so you're right that how do you strike that balance? Now, I can only speak for myself. And again, this is why I built an organization around this. To me, there has to be a definition of manhood. Now, I come from a Christian perspective, so I use the Bible as my blueprint for what a real man is. I look to Jesus Christ as an example. So you said, how do I not lose my edge? Well, based on my religious beliefs, and I know everybody has different beliefs and everything, that the word of God tells me that if I seek God first in his kingdom, in his way of doing things, all these other things will be added unto me, if that makes any sense, Robert. So, in other words, if I do it the way God tells me to do it, and based on my religious belief, he tells me that the first order is to love him first, then to learn and love my wife second, then to train up my children third, then to build successful relationships with other people fourth, then to pursue my higher calling of what my purpose and my passion is in life. In other words, my vision. Now you say, well, that Joe, your vision is down number 4, number 5. But according to what my word tells me, the Bible tells me that if I pursue him first, all those things will be added unto me. And Robert, I can only speak for myself. It's absolutely true. It's worked out exactly that way. Because now my definition of success is not how many homes I can buy, how many businesses I can start, but it's that order. And guess what I found out? I've succeeded in all those other areas. Now, if I can go back and talk to my younger self, is that Joe, get it in right order first. Be in right order first, and all the other things, you will never lose your edge. I'm still as driven as I was before, except I'm a lot happier and I have a lot more peace and a lot more joy. And my home is great now. Because I forgot to tell you that because of I failed as a man, I ended a 16-year marriage. That I mean, I almost lost my wealth. I compromised my health and my integrity. Almost lost everything because I had things out of order. Now I'm remarried. I'm in my 4th year of marriage now, and I'm telling you, it's the greatest thing in the world because I'm now in right order. If that makes any sense.
It does, and it's like, yeah. So it's almost like before it was like you had to kind of spray paint and you're just spraying every which way on the wall, and as opposed to like, okay, are you using the same paint, but now you're gonna paint the house and put the trim on there. And so the order that you said right there was number 1 God, number 2 a wife or partner, number 3 children, number 4 others, and then number 5 my calling. And what I like about that, and what I like about when people use, like whatever you want to call it, religion, God, or whatever religion
Hmm.
they're in, or even like, spirituality, a higher power,
Hmm.
it's what's been clicking for me lately, like the last day or two, is that a lot of these people, they use God as a good motivator, because if you just stopped with myself, me, that's kind of selfish, right? And then
Right.
if you then say, well, my motivator is fixing the whole entire world, then that's kind of the other extreme, and that's really easy to fall into. I'm going to get in everyone else's business, and then
Hmm.
and then I'm going to fall into being a victim if it doesn't work out my way. But then by kind of splitting it up into these different things, it helps so much. And if you use if you use God as your motivator, then it's not just all about yourself, and because you're surrendering to some kind of being, again, like whatever the person's concept of that is. But there's this higher being where you kind of let God do his or her thing. Then you get the best of both worlds, right? Because it's not all just this, paint spraying everywhere. It's not selfish. It's not victimhood, but it's just this blend of the best pieces of it. So God, partner, children, others, my calling. I mean, just amazing. You're blowing my mind here.
And I agree with you. And everybody, people say, is there a right order? Well, that's the right order for me according to my faith. And but my question is to anybody, even if they don't have the same faith, just question your order. Is that right? Is that order going to help you become the person that you want to be? And so the person that I want to be, and because people say, well, Joe, how do you define success now? Because I work with a lot of people when I speak all over the country. And I said, the way I define success now is I said, talk to my wife and you ask her that if she had the choice to marry me all over again, if she had a do over, would she? Would she marry all over again? Go to my children, go to my son first. My son is 20 years old, and ask him. And you ask Kendall, say, Kendall, is your dad the kind of man you want to become? Not to do what I do, not to make what I make, or achieve what I've achieved, the kind of character that your father exhibits. Do you want his integrity? Do you want his honesty, the way he deals with people, the way he works, his work ethic? Do you want to become that type of man? Go to my daughter, who's now 14, who's just started high school, and ask her, Faith, if looking at your dad, would you want the kind of marriage your dad and your mom have? Would you want to marry the kind of man that your father is? And see now, right, with that becoming my measuring stick for success, dude, I ain't worried about my business. Are you following me?
I am.
If
Yeah.
you see, with those things intact, see, it makes me a lot more effective now in my business because I'm not stressing over coming home and I'm not spending enough time with my family. I'm not, learning, how to cultivate a relationship with my daughter. All those things, if I take care of those things, to me, that's the measuring stick of success. And then go to my coworkers. We're putting it in order now, like I just said, the children. Go to my coworkers, the people who work around me, my clients, and ask them, does Joe serve you with integrity? If everybody was just like him, would you be happy in your business or him working for you? That's how, and while I'm doing all those things, guess what? I'm fulfilling my purpose and my calling here on earth. So my thing is always just question the order. And I was never questioned when I was growing up, Joe, why? Because the only thing I want to do was prove that my dad was wrong for abandoning me and not leaving me. That I wanted to show the world that I can achieve in spite of, but yet I didn't care about anything else around me except for me proving the world wrong. And yes, it motivated me and got me inspired. But after I stopped running and started working so hard, I looked up and guess what? There was no one around me who was enjoying the success with me.
I mean that you're talking about the hard questions, right? You're raising the more the really scary stuff. And so what I'm hearing, like the connection that I'm making is that as opposed to trying to have so-called balance, or so-called, trying to split your focus and saying, well, I'm going to put, 10% of this into this bucket. What you're saying is that a good way to measure things is to go back down that list and go down the list in, again, whatever order people, whatever works for whoever, but go down
Mhm.
the list and say, well, am I a good role model for this category? Am I a good role model for that category, right? Like, just does my wife like everything about me? Do my children, am I a good role model for my children? Am I a good role model for others? So that way, we don't drive ourselves crazy figuring out what to change. But what I'm hearing here is that way you can kind of go down the list and figure out, well, what needs the most improvement? What should I focus on? What's the low hanging fruit? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, it's all about priorities. Stephen Covey mentioned it in his book, in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He says that you can spend your life climbing that ladder of success. He said, but you don't want to ever get to the end of your road and say, was it leaning on the wrong wall? What are you climbing towards? What are you striving towards? In other words, what's most important to you? And you've heard, I forgot who did the study, but they always say do the deathbed test on your deathbed. What is most important to you? What really matters to you? Because I mean, I achieved a lot of success, quote, success that based on outside appearances, that I had everything that people say they always wanted. They want a successful business. They want the money. They want all the houses and the cars and all those type of things. But when it all came down to it, if I was on my deathbed, would that be the most important thing to me? Would that matter to me? But I can tell you now, and it's like I've lived two different lives, to see my family. My birthday was this past weekend. And so to see my family celebrate me, yeah, I mean, it just totally is unbelievable to see that they like this man that I've become. And guess what I found? My business did not have to suffer. My relationships are all have improved. And I don't think that's by coincidence. But again, I had to see it modeled in front of me by another mentor to see that and say, oh, so that's how that man was able to, quote, balance 8 children. That's my mentor, 8 children and a wife. And the thing is, he had right order. And you mentioned it before, Robert, that there's no such thing as really balance, because you can't do everything equally well, but you have to have it prioritized.
That makes a lot of sense. And the other thing that I'm hearing there is that, and I think back to, I mean, and some we don't all have it figured out, right? I mean, there's always room for improvement and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But I think back to when I was. I was more destructive than I am now, right? Like I had a bad mindset and I would burn out a lot and I would be really productive and then not. And I think that a huge change between then and now, and it relates to what you were just saying, is I would think a lot of, well, if only X happened, then I'd be happy, right? Or if
Right.
only this happened, then I would be fulfilled. Or if only this happened, then I would have all this money. Like if only I had this money or this house or this car, then it would lead to that. And that's just kind of what struck me when you were talking about the Stephen Covey thing of climbing all the way up the ladder, but then now it's leaning on the wrong wall. So now you have to go all the way back down the
Hmm.
ladder. So it's
Yeah.
like worse than starting from scratch. You're starting negative because you have to do the work to go down the ladder, go
Yes.
find where you should have been and repoint and go
Yes.
back up. And it's just like that was huge. And it kind of, at least in my mind, it ties to everything we're talking about today. That if I give up that idea of, if only my past was better, or
Hmm.
if only I had this college degree, or if only I had these friends or these connections or this business, then it would lead me to be happy. And I'm thinking, well, why put yourself into an if then situation like that?
And you're right, because we always keep thinking is that next thing. And I'll offer this to those who are listening, because I used to, and because I work with a lot of college students as well, and I always ask them, I said, do you know how we define success in society? And they always ask me, well, how do we define success? I said, I've narrowed it down to pretty much 4 things. And I said, listen to this. I said, either it's occupation, based on what you do. If I get that right job, if I get that right position, are you following me on this?
Yeah.
If I just achieve this level, if I get to this, if I get to the CEO position, if I get to the director or the manager, but based on occupation, what you do, that's usually the first thing a man asks you when you're on a plane with them. So what do you do for a living? The next thing is compensation. We tend to base success based on compensation. How much do you make? Now, we don't ask that because that's rude. But based on that first question, what do you do? We can kind of determine. If you are a heart surgeon, we kind of think, well, he's making a pretty good living. Or you're the CEO of a company, well, he's probably making a good amount of money. So we define our success typically by compensation. Now, I'm not saying all this stuff is wrong, but is it really the most important thing is what I'm asking. And then the next thing is education. Well, what school did you go to? Now, Robert, if I asked you what school do you go to and you told me Harvard, what am I thinking? Wow, that's impressive. And so we're based on how many degrees there. Oh, Joe, you had your doctorate degree before you were 30 years old. That's impressive. So we tend to say, well, he must be successful. And also, and this is a new phenomenon. Well, I guess it's not new, but we tend to put more weight on it now, is reputation. Robert, well, how many followers do you have? How many people follow you on Twitter? How many likes do you get on your page? How big is your platform? And so these are the things we typically look to say if we made it, if we're successful. But at the end of the day, Is it the most important thing? Now, I won't leave your listeners there thinking that's the most important thing. I had to redefine my life. And here's how I base that success now. Based on these, I have a different measuring stick. One, am I leading my family the right way? Based on those questions I told you before. Will my wife marry me all over again? Do my children, do they say this is the kind of man I want to become? This is the kind of marriage I want to have. This is the kind of man I would like to marry one day. Am I leading my family? Am I loving others sacrificially? And you said it earlier, Robert, it's not just about me. Am I loving others sacrificially? Am I serving them? One of my personal mentors was Zig Ziglar, the late Zig Ziglar. And, he had that famous quote. He said, if you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want.
Oh, yeah.
And that's loving and serving others sacrificially. Joe, it's not about you. Also, am I leaving a legacy? Now, this to me is important. I'm not talking about leaving an inheritance. I'm talking about leaving a legacy that they're going to talk about my character years from now. I'm talking about my grandkids, my great grandkids who will never meet me. Will they talk about the character that Joe Martin Jr. had? Will they talk about the impact he made on other people, the lives that he's changed, and people who respected him because of the kind of man he was, not how much he made or what he owned, but the kind of man that he was. And this is the last component I think most people miss. Not only would I want leave a legacy, love others sacrificially, and lead my family, but did he teach other men how to do the same? That's important. Did he take it to the grave with him? Did he take his greatness to the grave, or did he leave a trail for other people to follow? Did he take up some other young men? Did he teach them how to do what he did? To me, that's vitally important. You can't just do it for you. You have to do it for other generations as well. So I have one son, I have one daughter. I could easily stop and say, okay, my responsibility is to my family. But Robert, I got a responsibility to help other people other kids, especially young men who don't have a father figure in their home, who don't have it in their life to be a mentor. The guy who helped me, I wasn't his biological child, but he took me in. He had 8 kids, 5 sons and 3 girls, but he took me in. So he's taught me that I not only must I do this, I must teach others how to do it as well.
I mean, amazing and pretty cool. And so, like, what I'm hearing about this is that so if a man does not have a father figure, it sounds almost like, well, he's missing out on being enlightened, or on a better way of thinking. And like, I had a friend once tell me that the difference between men and women is that, men think in black and white, and then women have stuff like 50 shades of gray. Like, women think of all kinds of different ways. And you were talking just a few minutes ago about, the tendency of men to define success as like these concrete things, right? These black and white things, these things that you could easily see, like, money in the bank account. Do I have this degree or not? Do I have this level of income or not? And it sounds like, to me, that a better way of thinking is to, we still can't help being men and thinking of those kind of, concrete terms, but there's definitely another level of saying, okay, well, I can kind of use my man drive or whatever to say, okay, well, I have these goals, I want to get to them, but maybe
Right.
maybe the goal should be something more conceptual. So like you said, am I leading my family, loving others sacrificially? Am I leaving a legacy? Am I teaching other men? So these things that you can't quite see it's not quite concrete, but if you think about all the actions summed up, does it equal, or does it, is it break through or satisfy this goal of this more conceptual, like, higher level thing? Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But Robert, look at it this way, because I don't want people to think out there, especially the men out there listening, that goals are not important. I still set goals. I have them on my computer. I see them all the time. I can give you goals that I want to achieve, but the problem is that when goals become the end of what you're trying to pursue, because here's the problem with goals: you could actually achieve them, and when you achieve them, the next question that we as men tend to ask is, "What's next?" Let me give you an example. You said, Joe, I want to have a net worth of $500 million. Okay. When you achieve that, what's next? Most people don't say, okay, I'm done. What is enough money? A little bit more. And so you find yourself on that treadmill, on that cycle, that hamster cycle, always trying to do a little bit more. So you're never totally satisfied in living in the moment to really appreciate the journey. So I think goals are important, but they can't be the end all to be all. When do I stop parenting? When do I stop being a good husband? When do I stop being a leader? No, I must again set goals, but at the same time have the bigger picture of realizing that I'm not done until I'm done, which means dead. And so you must always have something bigger than just your goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because if you just say, okay, once I get to that goal, I'm gonna get to the end, right? Like, I want to be a good father. Okay, great, goal achieved, I'm done. Well, like, you're not really done, right?
No.
And then there's the other part of it where you said, like, okay, well, if my goal is to make $500 million to get to the goal, well, now what? The like the knee jerk reaction or the shortcut is to say, oh, 1 billion, oh, well, 2 billion, but then it's like you're kind of just going down, like I said earlier, you're going down this path, and next thing you know, you've driven to a point where you look around and like you're all by yourself because you didn't stop and course correct and reflect and try these other things out.
I didn't get the chance to see the movie, but I read part of Steve Jobs' book, and he's a great example that he achieved a lot and he's revolutionized the world. But look what it cost him. And I know, and I don't know him personally, but I'm sure he could look back and say, "Wow, I wish I could fix some relationships
Oh yeah.
that I ruined." And if that's usually with a person who's so driven that we all have the same story, just to different degrees, that typically when we become so tunnel vision on just being goal oriented, usually there's a trail of relationships that have been broken along the way. And to me, that's why when I gave you that list about the right order, you notice that my vision and my calling was the last thing on the list, because to me, relationships trump everything. Because when you're on your deathbed, trust me, trust me, you're gonna look, the people who remember, they're not gonna bring your assets in to talk about you at your funeral. People are gonna be invited to your funeral. And the question is, what would they say about you? What would they say the impact you made on their lives? What legacy do you want to leave? I want to leave a legacy of relationships that have taken people to another level, that make them believe they can do more. I think Steve Jobs is great. He's not my role model because I don't want to leave a trail. I don't care if I made 5 times as much as me. I don't want to leave the trail of relationships behind me like he did.
That's pretty powerful, and it sounds like that there is a better way as opposed to the path that some people are on. So, as far as you, Dr. Joe, I mean, so what are you up to? I mean, what do you have as far as like your websites or your books or your products? I mean, what do you have? If someone's listening to this, they're saying, I really can connect with that. I really can, up my game and be a better self and have a better existence, no matter what that means for those people. Where should and where can people go to find out all about you, what you do, and what you have to offer them?
I just made me think, I'm so engrossed in the conversation with that, I forgot to talk about what I do in this
Oh man,
area.
see, there's your priorities right there, right? Your
Yeah,
calling's at the
because
bottom.
I forgot that. Yeah, I've actually built. My vision is around helping men do this. So I built a multimedia organization called Real Men Connect. Real Men Connect, in which we help build stronger men through fellowship, through mentorship, and discipleship. And those three things are not the same. Fellowship is getting men to be able to communicate with one another, become friends, and build friendships. Mentorship is taking someone underneath your wing and being able to answer some questions for them. And discipleship to me is a more intense relationship where you're following somebody through the rest of their life with them, being that person, they can be their go-to person when they're stuck. I still pick up the phone and I call him my spiritual father, not my biological father, when I'm struggling with things, when it comes to my marriage, when it comes to my children. He has helped me through that process. He is now discipling me. He used to be a mentor. Now he's discipling me. And so we built an organization around that. When I say multimedia, we do it through a lot of channels, through our blog, through our YouTube channel, through our podcast, through social media. I mean, we have every angle covered, so men can never use the excuse, I don't know what to do or how to do it. And if they want to get connected to us, all they have to do is go to realmenconnect.com. Connect.com. And basically, when they get to that page, it's like a landing page, and they'll see, how do you want to grow with us? And you pick the way you want to grow. Is it through watching videos? Is it through reading about it? Is it connecting with other men socially, through social media, through following us? Any channel you want to learn, we've created a channel for you to learn that way. But I'll also even go a step further and give them another way they can get more information. is one of the things I hear from men all the time. Joe, what I'm hearing you saying is right. And I will confess that I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing the best I can, but I'm doing it by trial and error. What would you suggest I do to get back on the right track of becoming the man that I know I can become that's going to be better for my family? Well, I created what I call a blueprint for men, and you mentioned it in the introduction, called the Real Man Spiritual Leader Blueprint. And it's pretty much, you can buy it on Amazon or you can go to Barnes and Noble and get it, but I'm going to give it to your audience for free. All they have to do is go to rmcfree.com. That's rmcfree, Free, free.com, and they can get it for free. And not only will they get that, there's also my book called Are You the Man? 201 Lessons I Wish My Father Would Have Taught Me. And all that is not really like, it's a book, but it's not really written like a book. You can open it anywhere based on categories, on what you need to know as a husband, as a father, as a worker, about marriage or whatever. It's actually a book I wrote for my son that I've now shared with the world. So they can get those absolutely free. But if they want to pay for it, they can go on Amazon and get it, but they can get it for free if they go to rmcfree.com.
Awesome. Some people might want to pay for it just to have, the book to have on their bookshelf or hold in their hands or bookmark or take notes and all that good stuff. So thanks so much, Dr. Joe, for being on the show today. I mean, and if you're listening and you're a man and all of this, or even just a little sliver or anywhere in between, if anything of this resonates to you, if you are lacking that role model, if you want to be a better role model, if you want to be yourself, then you need to go, or be your best self, I should say, then you should go right now to realmenconnect.com. And to get that free blueprint, go to rmcfree.com. So Dr. Joe, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your message. And thank you so much for hopping on the show today.
Thank you, Robert. My pleasure.
Hey, this is Robert Plank. Now, to make sure that you get the transcript and you see all the links for the things you mentioned in today's show, go to robertplank.com/164 to see the show notes and everything else we have. And you'll even see the other episodes of this podcast on that page. Thanks a bunch.